consider voluntary euthanasia. So this year, I'm going to strive for something a little bit more coherent, perhaps educational, and this is going to be, and I mean this, a true story about a trial that I had about a year ago with accompanying important life lessons, which I always try to impart amidst my nonsense. So, the first rather obvious life lesson about this trial is that you should not build houses for crazy people. And when I say crazy people, I'm not using that term generically, like eccentric or odd or cranky. I mean full frontal lobotomy crazy. Now, let me give you an example. This case was essentially about a husband and wife who lived in a 5,000 square foot McMansion. In our area, the neighborhood they lived in, the homes were worth around $1 million. Now, I know that varies where you live, but this house had 10-foot ceilings and a French kitchen, whatever that is, and was way, way nicer than my house. But it had a variety of things that irritated them, leaks here and crack there and flashing wherever, and it should have been a case that resolved in about 6 months for $50,000. But because they're crazy, that didn't happen. And when I say crazy, and this is part of the education, how many of you know what a deposition is? All right. So we conducted the deposition of the wife. And the husband had a facial veneer of sanity, even though he wasn't. She did not. And so when I took her deposition, which should have been about 2 hours, because it's a garden variety construction dispute, and that should have consisted of, here's a photo of your gutter, what's wrong, here's a photo of your sidewalk, etc. This is verbatim how it basically went. This is a minute vignette. Good morning, ma'am. My name is Tony Lucido. I represent the developer. By the way, there was another attorney who represented the builder. We're here today because you sued them for 1,000 different theories of liability. Please tell me what my client has done to harm your house. There was a long pause, and then she said, your clients and their henchmen, she said henchmen, are stalking me 24/7. Now, here's a question for the lay people. When someone says something as facially nuts as that, what should your response be? Should you, for instance, say, how dare you? Objection, move to strike, non-responsive, and scurrilous? No. What you should say is, which I did say, please tell me more. And here was the more, and I have a transcript if you don't believe this. What exactly did my client do? I was at Weiss Market, I was in the deli line, I was getting salami. Yes, and then what? There was a man, a menacing man, he was standing near me, he was staring at me. Do you remember what the man looked like? Yes, I do. He was wearing a black leather jacket and a Russian hat. She actually said Russian hat. How long was he staring at me? I don't know, why are you asking me this, but it was approximately 25 minutes. You were in the deli line for 25 minutes? Yes, I was buying Capicola, it was crowded. What happened next? Well, I went to Giant because that's where I get my produce, and the Russian hat man followed me there. What did he do there? He was following me and he was laughing at me. Why was he laughing at you? Because I was putting a lot of potato chips in my cart. This is literally how it went. And so what you may have guessed is my culminating question to her after this series of vignettes with the Russian hat man and people putting tracking devices on her car was, ma'am, thank you for sharing. Why do you believe my client, a reputable developer, has anything to do with this? And literally because we were videotaping her, because of course we were. She pointed her stubby little accusatory finger at me and she said, you know. Because I was part of the conspiracy as well, of course. So this is what I mean when I say crazy person. By the way, just to give you a visual, if I had to describe her, and I'm going to be charitable, I would say that she's 3 feet 2 inches tall. I would say that she bears a striking resemblance to one of the troll heads that goes on the end of a pencil with the flaming hair. And I would describe her personality and demeanor as Joy Behar with crippling kidney stones. So she was a scintillating witness. So this is the crazy person, and of course you'll be shocked to know that the case did not settle for $50,000 because she wanted my client to give her his firstborn with a public caning and whatever else that they wanted. So we went to trial. The second life lesson that I can impart when you go to trial with a crazy person is that crazy people attract crazy lawyers and or galactically incompetent lawyers, which is fundamentally indistinguishable from crazy lawyer. So the example of this is, the trial was to go 2 weeks. The crazy lawyer, who had never actually had a trial before, and so he had no idea of what to do, told the judge that his case, because he's the plaintiff, was going to go for 5 days. How he estimated this, I'm assuming, is with a magic 8-ball. He had no idea. On the first day of the trial, in the first hour of the trial, before the very crotchety, impatient judge, within the first hour, the judge literally stood up from the bench and said to this lawyer, "You better start making sense right now." Now, I will tell you that in 24 years of doing litigation, if any judge ever said anything like that to me in front of a jury, I would have left the courtroom, taken an Uber to Alaska, become an ice road trucker, hauling vegetables to indigenous people, or perhaps taste testing expired milk. But I would not be trying cases. And so after this fundamental discombobulation immediately to start the trial, this went on for a day. And it leads to the third life lesson, which is that crazy people with crazy lawyers do not understand that sound travels in an open courtroom. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, by the second day, this is still their case because he told the judge it would take 5 days. We went to lunch. He had finished with his witnesses for the morning. And by the way, one thing we realized, and this is the only sensible thing that he did in the entire case, because his client, the wife, was insane, he decided it wouldn't be wise to put her on the stand. Good choice. Juries generally don't react well to insane people. So we come back from lunch. The judge says to him, "Call your next witness." He says something like, "Oh, Your Honor, my next witness, I just found out, is in the hospital with end-stage scurvy." Yeah, okay, call your next witness. "Well, Your Honor, I was going to show the 3-hour video of my incomprehensible expert, but my laptop was hit by an asteroid." So now the judge, in a more menacing tone, says, "Call your next witness." Which, of course, at this point, everyone in the courtroom realized he has no next witness, none. And he is now poleaxed in the middle of the courtroom, mute. And I will tell you, if you've ever been in a courtroom, 5 seconds of silence in a courtroom is an eternity. Let's do it. That's 5 seconds. He stood there for 30 seconds not knowing what to do, and so he finally had to turn. Oh, by the way, just for verisimilitude, let's call his client Ursula the Sea Witch, okay? So he turns and goes back to his client, Ursula. She's been sitting behind counsel table the entire time, rolling her eyes and grunting and acting out. And he proceeds to have an audible conversation with her in front of a jury that goes like this. "You have to get on the stand. You have to get on right now." I won't. I effing hate you. I effing hate him." She's pointing at me. "I effing hate that guy. He's the spawn of Satan. I will not do it." He's begging her. You must get on the stand. If you don't, the judge is going to end our case." The jury is watching all of this. Finally, the judge says, "Do you have a witness?" He says, "Yes, Your Honor, I call Ursula the Sea Witch to the stand." So she gets up, and smoke pouring out of her ears smashes through the gate, sits down, smashes down in the witness stand, and of course he's not prepared to ask her anything, and so he's stammering and he says, well, please introduce yourself to the jury, what is your name? And she says, that's a stupid question, they know my name, ask me another question. Things got worse from there. I get to cross-examine Ursula. Now, you have to understand that during her testimony, one of the things that she was at pains to emphasize is that she always follows the golden rule, and she is always above board and ethical and tries to be nice and kind like Mr. Rogers to everyone in her life. And this was just a horrible, tragic misfortune, and she can't understand why her neighbors shun her. So the first thing that I pull up on the video screen in this $1 million neighborhood is the 18-foot enclosed trailer that she uses to sell her wacky tchotchkes. I don't know, it's like wicker hats or something. And the trailer that she has parked in their driveway, she has painted in black spray paint in 6-foot letters, F, my client and the builder. And she didn't say F, she spelled it out, she's a good speller. And on this other side, she said F, the development in which she lives. So the jury, of course, there was a woman in the front row of the jury who the entire time after an hour was slack-jawed with her glasses like, and I said to Ursula, is this consistent with what you've just told the jury about the golden rule and your father teaching you Christian ethics? And of course that didn't go well for her. Now, here's another layperson question. After a cataclysm like that on cross-examination, her lawyer has the chance to do what we call redirect, okay? What should the lawyer do? Should they redirect? No. What the lawyer should do is say, I have no further questions for Ursula, and get her to a black site where the jury will never remember her again. But what Inspector Clouseau, who I'll call her lawyer, does, he says, could we bring the picture of the trailer back up? To which I say, amen, hallelujah, brother. Let's put it back up there. And so then he proceeds to say, in leading question fashion, now, Ursula, obviously at the time you were going through a traumatic event, living in your $1 million house of usher, and it was very hard for you, not consistent with your personality, yes. One of the other rules of lawyering, this is generally on cross-examination, is, some of you know this, there's lawyers in the room, you don't ask a question to which you don't know the answer. That usually doesn't apply to your own client, but in this case it did. And so the lawyer then says to her, and I knew what she was going to say, he says, now, in hindsight, don't you consider that to have been something that you regret? And I am not making this up because this is Ursula. She is seated here, her lawyer is directly in front of her, the jury box is here, and she turns in her squeaky chair and looks at the jury and says, nope. So that didn't go well. So crazy lawyer, crazy client, doesn't understand that sound travels. And the fourth life lesson from this trial is that crazy lawyers with crazy clients also have random crazy people that are part of their trial team. So if you don't know this, when you try a case, the only people that are allowed to speak are the lawyers of record, and you have to enter your appearance, meaning I can't just randomly show up at my buddy's trial and say, hey, I'd like to make a few comments. I'm a lawyer. It doesn't work that way. So what we noticed at the outset of this trial is that there was a strange woman, and I will say this, she was a very elderly woman, and I mean very elderly, and she sort of dressed like drunk Angela Lansbury, and we didn't know what she was doing, but what we did know is that she was constantly at counsel table, passing notes and whispering and strategizing, and as in the Seinfeld phrase, she was clearly the Svengali of this group. So the fourth day of the trial, when yet again Inspector Clouseau has been flummoxed by the judge yelling at him and saying, please provide me with an answer, to which he had none, I'll call her Miss Daisy. Miss Daisy stands up and begins walking between counsel table up to the well in front of the bench where the judge is. And I'm watching this unfold in slow motion, and my friend who was representing the builder, I turned to him and I said, this is going to be awesome. And so, and I'm watching the judge as the crimson is rising in his face as he's standing up, seeing her approach. And have any of you seen the movie Christmas Vacation? The last good movie that Chevy Chase did? And so you remember the aunt that packed the cat and the present in the box, right? She was also the one that, when she was to say grace, said the Pledge of Allegiance. Well, this lady sounded exactly like her. And so she approaches the microphone and says, "Your Honor, I'm Miss Daisy, and I would like to say a few things on behalf of Ursula the Sea Witch," at which point the judge stands up and says, "Be quiet! Go sit down! You have no business here!" And he literally says, "I don't know what the hell is going on in this courtroom!" One of the things I'll share, which I just thought of, is that because Inspector Clouseau was so incompetent, frequently you can overhear what lawyers are saying at counsel table because they're close together. Defense table is here, he and his client are here. And since he had no idea what was going on, he would eavesdrop. And, obviously eavesdrop as my friend and I were conferring. And so he would hear terms that sounded really cool and legally. And so at one point, he displayed some piece of evidence which he completely misrepresented, and I said, "I want a sidebar." Do you know what a sidebar is? That's where you approach and talk to the judge in private. And I went up and I told the judge, "I want a curative instruction," which means he just lied in front of the jury. You need to fix it and tell them that was baloney. So he must have heard curative instruction and thought, "That's a groovy term, I think I'll use that." So about a half hour later, I'm cross-examining someone, and he says, "Objection." He stands up, he says, "Objection. I would like a curative instruction." And the judge says, "Overruled. That doesn't even mean anything." So my friend and I, we talked about this. We said, "Look, what we should do is we should make up a complete nonsense term as if it is a very crucial part of the case, and we should let him hear it and see if he will say it." And so we didn't do it, and I eternally regret it, because we would say, "Listen, it's time for Viropossimus, right? We need to unleash Viropossimus." And this guy would have stood up in his closing, "I demand Viropossimus." All right, so what are we at? 4 life lessons? Okay, 5th one. This is a change of pace. Change of pace. You've had enough crazy life lessons. Everyone loves Amish people. Can we agree on that? Now, why am I talking about Amish people? Well, because one of the things this lawyer didn't understand is what witnesses are for. And here's the tip, for instance, if you're in an argument with your spouse and you want to call a witness, here's the 2 things the witness should be able to do. You should know what they're going to say, and what they're going to say should be helpful to you. That's pretty much it. His theory was more nuanced and outside the box, which was, I'm going to call every person who worked on this house, having no idea what they'll say, but we'll all be surprised at trial. So one of the witnesses that he called was an Amish man who had worked on the house, because in Pennsylvania, we're near Lancaster, the Amish are very prominent in the construction industry, and I've represented many of them, and in fact, this is not really a joke, I've had to defend them in cases. What I usually say in my closing, after the other expert says, well, the workmanship was defective, is I say to the jury, he's Amish! He can't be negligent, he's Amish. And the jury goes, you're right, he's Amish. Defense verdict. So in this case, we'll call this gentleman, Ira Stoltzfus. And Mr. Stoltzfus is central casting, Natalie attired, white beard, infinitely polite, and he strolls up, no idea why he's there, and the lawyer has no idea why he's there, and so he then says to Mr. Stoltzfus, remember, his case is to demonstrate that there was stuff wrong with the house. And he says, Mr. Stoltzfus, did you work on this house? Well, yes, sir, yes, I did. And what did you do? I did the roof, sir. Did you do the flashing? Yes, I did. Did that flashing leak? "Oh no, sir. I've been doing flashing since I was 3 when we put up Jedediah's pole barn, and it's never leaked ever. In fact, if it did leak, I'd be excommunicated." "Well, didn't you have to cut a hole in the roof to put in a boot?" Now, I guarantee you he was on Construction Terms Wiki, because I'm sure he thought a boot was a shoe, okay? He doesn't know what a boot is. It's a piece of PVC. And so then Mr. Stoltzfus says, "Oh yes, sir, we did. We cut a hole, but we cover that with rubber and triple rubber, and no water gets in, and we have 14 Amish in the attic checking to see that there's no drips, nothing. I see." Now, he clearly then had spent the previous night brainstorming on some gotcha question, and this is literally what he said, and I almost laughed out loud in court, because he then said in a very stentorian tone, "But sir, isn't it true that when you were working on this house, Hurricane Sandy was bearing down?" That wasn't even a year of Hurricane Sandy. And so the Mr. Stoltzfus said, "Oh no, sir, I think you are very, very wrong about that. It was dry as the Sahara for a whole month." Thank you. No more questions. So everyone likes Amish people. So the final sort of life lesson about this is that crazy people do not respond well to negative outcomes. Now, I'm not talking about the outcome of the trial, which we won, because my friend, the other lawyer, and I had made a pact that if we lost the trial to Inspector Clouseau, we were going to assemble a Viking funeral pyre, light ourselves on fire, and go down to Susquehanna. No. This was, and this is boring legal stuff, so I'll explain it simply. They had tried to get their attorney's fees and expert fees from the other defendant, and there was issues about that. And so the judge said, "I'm going to decide that issue during the trial." Now, take a guess. This is a house dispute that should have been around $50,000 to $100,000. Just take a guess. What do you think they had paid their super genius lawyer at this time? Can anyone shout it out? What do you think? $500,000 plus another $100,000 in expert fees. That's a good guess. So they were desperate. They must recover the fees. Now, I will forever regret the fact that because those issues did not pertain to my client, I was allowed to be excused on the Friday when the judge was going to issue his ruling. So only my friend was there, and I'm recounting this secondhand, and he's very funny. And so he called me at 3 o'clock, and he said, "Tony, the judge ruled on the fees issue, and he ruled in our favor." And I said, so what happened? And he said, "Well, Ursula emitted a scream as if, in open court, as if someone had just murdered all of her children. And then she fell on the ground in the middle of the court, started flopping around like a trout, and basically going, 'Ah! Ah!' And the judge got up, turned and went out his little side door. And she did this, and he said, I was afraid to look at her because I was going to start laughing. And so finally the sheriffs came in and picked her up under both arms, carried her out into the hall, injected her with antipsychotics or whatever they did, and that was the end. And I am eternally upset that I did not experience the schadenfreude of watching that unfold. I was deprived of it. So, what is the point of all this? Nothing really, other than I thought it was an amusing story, and it was better than vacation stories. And I will say, I'm eternally grateful to Susan. She has the gift of hospitality, and it's a privilege for me to be here. Thank you.